Let's pick up now on our top story, a sign perhaps of further thawing in relations between North and South Korea. The sister of Kim Jong-un is set to travel to the south for the opening of the Winter Olympics. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by the founder and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, Alan Mendoza. Alan, thank you very much for being with us here on Global. What do you read into this?
Well, actually, you could read anything you wanted to into this, because we've seen so many examples in the past of the North Koreans acting in contrarian ways and determining their policy on a weekly or monthly basis. So on the one hand, it could indeed be a great thawing of relations, certainly a very high-profile delegation, crucially a member of the leader's family, direct relative, coming along to head the delegation essentially. On the other hand, it could be a tactic that's been used in the past, which is simply to distract from the reality of that this regime is pursuing a very dangerous nuclear program. It's been sort of affected by the latest round of sanctions and somehow wants to claw itself back without actually giving up anything in doing so. So it's a bit early to tell what this actually means.
Do you think there's any possibility that Kim Yo-jong will meet President Moon as a delegate from her brother?
It's possible. There's certainly a possibility. There are rumours around that she may have a personal message to impart to the South Korean president. So we'll have to wait to see if that actually transpires. I think what is interesting is how far the South Koreans are prepared to go to accommodate the North Korean delegation, potentially even being in breach of UN sanctions in order to welcome a delegation that wouldn't have been welcomed so long ago.
How would they be breaching sanctions?
Well, you have a member of the North Korean delegation who is actually on the UN list, essentially. Therefore, if the North moves him to the South allows that to happen, they will be in breach of UN rules, essentially. And I believe that's what they're asking the Security Council at the moment. What does that mean, essentially? What will that mean for us for having breached those rules?
Now, behind all this and all the razzmatazz of the Olympics, do we assume that the North is still boosting its stockpile of nuclear weapons?
Absolutely. I think that's a given. I think it's quite right for people like the Vice President of the US, Mike Pence, and the Japanese Prime Minister to speak about the reality of what's been happening over the last couple of years. In the past, we've seen the North Koreans use diplomatic démarches of this kind just to cover and conceal the fact that they're continuing their program. I see little reason to believe that they've given it up suddenly. So we have to assume that they are going to behave as in the past and continue to build that while they also make a pretense of talking or do some actual talking.
Do you think it is smart or naive to possibly move towards talks between North Korea and the United States?
Well, I think there are several steps in this whole process. The first thing we'd have to see, I think, for that to happen is a pause in the North's program. It's unlikely for the US to want to sit down with a country that is continuing to build a very dangerous nuclear weapons program. The North is going to have to give some indication it's stopped that in order to get the US round the table, as opposed to the US being seen as a fig leaf for its continued nuclear pretensions.
And meanwhile, what about economics? What about the economic sanctions that we talked so much about at the end of last year? Have we any evidence that they're biting?
Well, it's a bit too early to tell. As you know, sanctions take quite a while to work themselves through, but there's no doubt that petrol sanctions in particular and the annoying sort of travel bans that have been targeted at leading figures in the regime will be being felt. The question, of course, is how much that's the case and how much the regime wants to move those off. And I have to say, I think the move diplomatically here at the Olympics has been more to do with sanctions than anything else. I think the North sees that as a direct threat to its economy and would like to see them removed. So anything that can get them to a negotiating table where that becomes a possibility is of great interest, I think, to the regime.
Alan Mendoza, thanks very much for joining us.